Unless you've been locked behind a door, controlled by a lever you don't have the ability to interact with for the past week and a half, you're probably aware that the Adventure Mode beta for Dwarf Fortress was recently released to the public. Because I've never been able to play the old Adventure Mode without keeping the wiki page with its controls open on a second screen, I've never gotten super into it before. But now, with all the new menus, buttons, and controls laid out in front of me, I feel like I have an opportunity to go beyond the simple adventures I've done in the past and finally figure out what Adventure Mode is all about. And so, over the past week, I've gone on a half-dozen short adventures to get myself up to speed and to prepare for the longer adventures I plan on tackling in the weeks to come. My first adventurer was Tobal the Dwarf, who I armed with a hammer and unleashed into the world. As Tobal, I wandered through the forest near the hillocks where I embarked and tried to decipher all the new buttons and menus at my disposal. I thought I was having a good idea when I used the bug search button to find a thrips, the object interaction button to pick it up, and the inventory button to find and eat it, but apparently Tobal disagreed. With my infinite food hack foiled, I wandered away from the forest and into the haunted territory to the south. There I found my first enemies and used the new fighting menus to hammer a couple undead crows out of the sky in a real confidence booster of a first fight. This newfound confidence was quickly dashed though, as my continued wandering eventually led me into an encounter with a grizzly bear that was grisly, to say the least. Running away from a charging grizzly bear without at least trying to change my movement speed may have been my biggest mistake, but forgetting to unsheath my hammer certainly did me no favors. Following my first death, I created a second adventurer who would have no need to fear bears, because I paired Zin the Squirrel Man with a pet black bear named Luth. While Luth's ability to get underfoot was somewhat mystifying given Zin's stature, I did enjoy the bond that came with traveling as a party. The only downside was that the main thing I wanted to do as Zin was pet Luth, an ability available to seemingly every human we came across that took an interest in her, but which was unavailable to me. In an effort to leave polite society behind so that I wouldn't be reminded of what I couldn't do, I took Luth and wandered in the wilderness for a while, until we unfortunately found ourselves walking into a goblin camp that I for some reason thought wasn't hostile. I knew I was a goner immediately after walking into a dormitory filled with hostile goblins and accepted my fate, but the muscular goblin axeman who killed me also called my name insignificant, which felt like a personal insult far worse than any death. And so I returned to adventure mode a third time as Slenchy, a freakish, one-eyed, trunked experiment known as a soldier of natural stolen, that I hoped would be so scary that nobody would even consider insulting me. As Slenchy, I didn't seem to need food, water, or sleep, and so I wandered through the wilderness 24 hours a day, taking in the beautiful sights of volcanoes, rivers, and town gardens as I went. It turned out that this natural beauty was the one thing I should have feared most though, because in the end it wasn't a randomly aggressive encounter that killed me, but my attempt to cross a particularly wide river. I had thought that my trunk would probably periscope me to safety, but apparently being unable to swim trumps having a snorkel for a face, and even monsters with no use for eating, drinking, or sleeping still need to breathe sometimes. While aimlessly wandering through the vast forests of my world as a dwarf, squirrel man, and night creature was a lot of fun, with my fourth adventurer, Kill the Dwarf, I decided to give myself a goal by embarking on a quest to visit First Embraced, which is the oldest fortress in my world. I embarked nearby, so my journey was uneventful, but things got very interesting very fast once I was in First Embraced territory. I made my way into the fortress and discovered the old barracks, which was now filled with lots of dead dwarves and some pretty good equipment. After swapping out my bronze armor for iron, I made my way down the entrance stairs and came into contact with the first living fortress residents I had seen, 2 mostly naked elves and a dwarf woman who turned out to be the mayor. I didn't think she was doing the greatest job with the place, considering the large population of goblins taking up violent residence in the old noble rooms and the pile of dead bodies in the tavern, but it had been nearly 2 centuries in-game since I had left First Embrace to fend for itself, so I could excuse some of the rough edges. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before I found an edge that was a little more than rough when I tried to look at my old workshop area and was instantly ambushed by a ghostly miner who battered me so hard I died before I even knew what was happening. I was pretty sure there was nothing that could be done about the ghosts, so with my fifth adventurer, Zalban the Dwarf, I threw caution to the wind and embarked on a quest to visit my old Tavern Fortress, Cavern Bar, Ghosts Be Damned. When I got there, the situation was pretty similar to that I first embraced, only this time there were no living residents in amongst the carnage. I checked out the hallway leading out to the cavern because that was the defining feature of this fortress when it was active, and noticed that there was a bit of a trail of blood leading up to the doors. I knew to expect the pile of bones on the other side. I was the one who had left them there, but the whole sight painted quite a grim picture of what might have happened to this fortress when I left it behind. I contemplated this tragedy over at the windows, looking over the wonderful water feature I sacrificed a dwarf for all those months ago, and then made my way out of the fortress before a ghostly dwarf could ambush me in one of the back hallways. With my cavern bar trip over, I decided to return to the aimless wandering of my first 3 adventurers, and began exploring the civilizations living in the southern forests and marshes of my world. I visited a dwarven hillocks, where I threw up, a human hamlet, where I didn't, and eventually a hidden lair where I probably wanted to, because, inside, I discovered 3 dusk freaks turning elf bones into bone meal. I wanted to run away because I knew it was my only chance, but a misclick at the bottom of the screen brought me one step closer to my enemies, making it impossible for me to reach the door even at a full sprint. Every move I made, a dusk freak was there, attacking me and forcing me to dodge even further into the lair. While I was eventually able to kill one in my martial trance, once it wore off, there was nothing I could do to stop the others from grabbing, shaking, and biting me until I died. With 5 out of 5 of my short adventures ending in death, I decided to set out on my 6th and final adventure as Murding the Goblin, with the goal of killing something big and retiring a hero. With an iron scimitar, a war dog named Ono, and as much copper armor as my points could buy, I set off from the human town of Wound Basins and began my trek north to the nearest lair. It allegedly contained an ogress, based on the common knowledge of the area, though as I approached the lair entrance, I could overhear a conversation between the ogress and her bridegroom, which I didn't know how to interpret. I had an image of what an ogre and an ogress should look like in my head when I entered the cave, so when I saw a black, leathery creature hidden away behind the human bone meal quern, I was a little taken aback. I immediately left the cave in an effort to bait the bridegroom out onto the surface where I could fight him on his own, but after waiting for a while, I was forced to re-enter the lair to try again. This time, the ogress was there as well, and when I made my tactical retreat to the surface, she was in hot pursuit. As she came up out of her lair, I had an opportunity to target her neck with a normal square slash with my scimitar, which somehow landed perfectly, killing her in a single blow. With how strong and muscular she had been described, and how weak and frail her bridegroom supposedly was, I thought that killing her meant that the challenge of the lair was over, and all I needed to do was go back in and take out the bridegroom to get the hero's retirement I wanted. Unfortunately, as I took a step towards the bridegroom, a second ogress was revealed. This fight went far worse than the one on the surface, with both night creatures landing multiple hard hits on both Ono and me. Eventually, I was able to behead the bridegroom, turning the fight into a 2-on-1, but at the same time, Ono was struggling to stay conscious, and once he passed out, it was only a matter of time before he passed away, and the fight became a 1-on-1 between the 3-eyed ogress and me. I had failed to hit her with what felt like my last 10 attacks, and was beginning to panic, so rather than use this moment to gather my strength and bravery to stand tall against the ogress and deliver a killing blow, I opened the movement menu and set my crawl speed to scramble, which turned out to be a decent idea because she bled to death before she could hit me with any more attacks. Having killed multiple big and scary creatures, the only thing on my mind was that I needed to get somewhere safe so that I could comfortably end this adventure with a retirement rather than a funeral. So I went back into the cave to grab Ono's body, trekked back to Wound Basins, killing a giant panther on the way, and gave up the adventuring life next to Ono's body at the altar we had embarked from. While I definitely still have a lot to learn and relearn about adventure mode, these 6 short adventures have gotten me to the point where I feel somewhat confident tackling some bigger quests. Which is good, because I've created a bit of an adventure mode bucket list that I would like to complete before moving on from this world, and some of the potential quests seem like they might be pretty tough. But we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, thank you for watching, an extra thank you to those of you who support me on Patreon, and I'll see you next time.